So one of the reasons President Trump keeps repeating the Biden administration's guilt with people from prisons and from mental institutions is because right through administrations, the people working for them have been fabricating transcripts with the interbranch, the private tie to them, including doctors with badges and the FBI directors. They're putting fake transcripts in databases, and they're having family members of campuses, including fire campuses, and overt criminal enterprises and private ones also associated with the people and places next to like campuses like Harvard Hospital. They run into high line progressions where mental evaluations are forced. They're faking transcripts there, and they're forging names of other doctors, and they're charging people's insurance on a mass scale. They have more scams at Harvard Hospital and throughout the country. Also, tactically, delusions wrong. We have all the answers we need right through World Trade. There are World Trade Center attack rolls that former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, had and has, with names on all sides of with names on the side of the World Trade Center attack, and the court next to it, involved with the court with the sequence shift from names on all sides of that case, their sources, involved with predicate acts against me, interstates too, that were timed, as ones involved with Washington, D.C., a bunch of ways too, with 2 speech class teachers I had, increasingly with people with the corrections offices of Connecticut and the judicial branch offices, involved with the foreign and domestic military, criminally foreign influence uses of people involved with religious nutbags at religious spots. And then they want to pretend it's personal. And when people say that, same ones that pretend they're about free speech and they're just saying what they think, they can't afford to have the response because they recorded themselves with sequence shifts. Whole bunch of people tied to Eric Oliveri and Craig Oliveri involved with wire mail crimes and with the FBI and people involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases with them in the news at the same time, putting identity theft, fraud, slanders, and sequence shifts. He sought me out as a complete stranger to make confessions. No, I never tried to contact Eric Oliveri. Increasingly, people with UPS and other shipping locations involved with Eric Oliveri in the FBI and military, with people on Griswold Street, involved with former mayors too, and people at parks and next to it planting evidence, also at corners of the streets and town lines. They even have Joseph Lieberman and his family involved, with people increasingly involved with body dumping spots and child defenders and identity theft, fraud, slander, some Jewish themed nutbags. Put it with people on the other side, like a Paul Zano repeated the name Jew around me, and a Ray Claw, and I hardly know him. I only know him planting evidences recorded. The only time I know him is planting evidences, sequence shifts. That's why in other words, he has roles in 1994 with a John Mano who drove up to my house and begged me to go let him drive me to school right after my car was broken. In other words, he has roles with people on Elm Street with the foreign and domestic military and people in Weathersfield and Rocky Hill in conjunctions to that, like to Route 3, and conjunctions to that, for example, like the state judicial branch offices, increasingly involved with foreign and domestic military with names next to it, also with the World Trade Center attack with the military, and with what Weathersfield Pizza House has roles with a bunch of natures of organized crimes and neighbors of people associated with them too, involved with untimely deaths, identity theft, fraud, slanders, wire crime acts and methods of Weathersfield police. Also used to cover up how they pretend to fake ties, fake nature of the ties to me in databases, fake motivations for it. How are you? So in other words, they're putting fake things in databases on a mass scale, and they've been doing this. And one of the things the breaching method shows them they have to do, like sometimes there's a reason why no one ever used their voice to overcome where and how the interbranch have roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and religious nutbags and child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced years apart. There's still more then and now. They're not following mandated law. And they're putting fake things in databases when we catch them. They've been using the campuses for wire crime acts and methods and mail crime acts and the databases, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. They're calling attacks on themselves because the counters to it, too. In other words, I'm not saying, in other words, they have organized crimes involved against the people. I'm not saying that's right for them to do that, but they're changing and faking what's actually recorded with the campuses. They have all kinds of criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rot. You know, they tell us this. They have replaced what our founders communicated for themselves. And they directed us to understand themselves plural, as James Madison, the individual person. And he didn't have a free speech even when he was a president. They left that to classify for us. Rather than interpret that as the experts were supposed to do, they have self-guided rules with uses of their words, leaving out what they communicated, pretending they didn't really have free. They didn't communicate that and how and why they didn't have free speech. That and how and why they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, more than 13. And everyone was roles with that, and then America's founders were born. Anyone who tried to complain about that was censored, including if there was a majority of people, and that was adapted to by a sick method, including if it was everyone. And that's still the thing. You guys are not, get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. WFSB is a bunch of people involved with the military, with former mayors from Wethersfield, and with America's role, and with Connecticut's campuses roles with Saudi Arabia, and with the other countries involved, like and with Israel too, for the Jewish theme, and their roles with the state capital, and delusions too when they speak about religions. In other words, the beginning of the Old Testament says only defend right here, where the names of the people of sciences will come together, and the part that comes before it. And the beginning of the Quran has a part that says all that matters is if someone's going to be honest about their use of the name Allah for the identity of all space-less existence or not. And this is important too, because further, nature shows us that it is functional, how it is hyper-invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. For example, the invisible but still discernible parts of speech, and how and why we need to appreciate more than one word for a verb. What we are appreciating is also the body of the hyper-invisible but still discernible. Where and how we are shown by nature that there are totally different individual species, bodies of individual bodies, with all group differences being generated by the one that generates the totally different species bodies. Distinct, but also non-distinct, and simultaneous, but also as a further hyper-simultaneous nature, a further distinct identity of value progression. Therefore, hyper-invisible, but still discernible. In other words, I've been speaking about this in my videos. English was revealed to be taught this way, many pray. So also the translators on the Arabic language, there's a Dr. Shu who has roles with people with shopping centers and malls, with the intelligence community, and people intercities, and people increasingly with war crimes with Wethersfield police, predicate acts with them. Wethersfield police pretended conversations with me at the Wethersfield police station when I was a kid and now as an adult. Right through administrations, they have collusions with the World Trade Center attack, increasingly with a bunch of military people they're hiding behind too. Get the police chief Cintron on paper. Stop being a coward, little police chief Cintron. Get on paper, little boy, before you bring the Mazakawa bakery in, which I could bring him in right now because you brought him in. What are you doing with that corner of Elm Street in Wethersfield and Rocky Hill? What are you doing with the names next to religious spots? Better get fixed to fake databases, punk. Hey, what's your daughter's middle name?